I was actually inspired by one of my classmates at a Temple. I went to Temple University in Philadelphia for a little bit, and one of my classmates, you know who you are if you're watching this, but he was telling me that he practiced for an hour a day. And when I heard him say that, I was like, he must be pretty good. And it's funny because he didn't say yes, but I could tell by his body language that he was like, yeah, he knew he was pretty good. So I was like, oh shit. And then I saw him play online, and I was like, wow, he's really good. And so he actually inspired me to start practicing for an hour a day, and I still do it to this day. Alright, so the title of this video is Don't Play for Just 1 minute. And that's kind of just like my funny way of saying that you need to put in the time in your practice so you get better. So it's kind of a no-brainer when you think about it. It's like, obviously, if you just practice for a minute, you're not going to get much better than you were. But it's funny because common knowledge isn't always common practice. So some people actually mess that up. It's like, oh, I'm just going to practice for a minute. And then they're like, oh, why am I not any better? It's because practice for a minute. The ideal is to practice for as long as you possibly can if you want to get better and better. You can look at the greatest guitar players right now in the world, and you can pretty much guarantee that these people practice their friggin' asses off. They practice for hours. There are guitarists who I can think of right now, like I thought of Jeff Loomis or Jason Becker back in the day, who would just practice like all the time. Like that's just what they did. It was just fun. Like, it didn't feel like practice, you know, it felt like just fun, and they were just playing. They were always challenging themselves, but they also saw it as fun, which allowed them to play for long amounts of time, right? So they would play for like 8 hours a day or whatever. So if you have 8 hours, that's friggin' amazing, and if you play for 8 hours, that's awesome. Most people don't have 8 hours though, and that's kind of where it can get tricky because we have some responsibilities. If you can't practice 8 hours a day, which it's actually fine, you don't have to practice for 8 hours a day to get really good. I mean, you'll get extremely good if you do that, but it's not completely necessary to get good at the guitar. I would say ideally like an hour a day is really good. And I actually used to not have any kind of idea of time when I was playing the guitar back in the day. And so I couldn't even tell you how long I practiced for. Sometimes it could be for an hour. Other days it could have been for 10 minutes. I don't even know. The problem was that it fluctuated. And that's not really a good thing. Like I was just saying, like you can't just practice for like 10 minutes and then like 2 hours the next day, then like 5 minutes the next day and expect to get like consistent results. So I realized that the minute that I decided to start practicing for an hour a day, I started getting so much better. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made for my playing. So I highly, highly recommend that. If you don't have an hour, very minimum would be, I would say, 5 minutes a day. That's the very minimum if you can't afford any other time. But the other side of it is that really it's like we make time for things that are really important for us. So if you immediately say like, oh, I don't have the time for that, well, maybe it actually means that you're not prioritizing it. Maybe it means that you don't really want to get better that bad. You know what I mean? To be completely honest, you have to be really honest with yourself. Because you have to ask yourself, could you get up 5 minutes early? My point is, if you really want it badly, you'll make the time. You can most likely make an extra 5 minutes in your day to practice guitar. If you can't do that, then you probably don't want it enough. So I would say very minimum 5 minutes. A really good number is an hour. I've definitely found a lot of good stuff from an hour. If you could practice really long, like 8,000 million hours a day, then that's obviously even better. But an hour would be like really good. So anyway, that was the second step. Number 2, which was don't play for just 1 minute. So definitely like and subscribe to my channel if you like this, and I will see you in the next video. Step 3.